Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Boss Economics World, the only place on the internet where we rip the mask off the economic clown show and expose the government's mismanagement for what it is, a masterclass in self-inflicted wounds. I'm your host, the guy who's been screaming into the void about tariffs, inflation, and Fed flip-flops since before it was cool. Buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the latest economic dumpster fire, a darkening U.S. economic outlook, a Federal Reserve asleep at the wheel, and a government that seems hell-bent on turning the American dream into a recessionary nightmare. Oh, and did I mention tariffs? Yeah, we're going there, again. Let's start with the big, flashing neon sign of doom. 3/4 of economists surveyed by Bloomberg now predict either a full-blown recession or a zero-growth scenario in the next 12 months. That's up from a measly 26% back in March 2025. Folks, that's not just a jump, that's a rocket launch into panic territory. And yet, in true Fed fashion, the median estimate still has our beloved central bankers twiddling their thumbs, penciling in just 2 quarter-point rate cuts for 2025. September and December, they say, as if the economy will politely wait for their scheduled tea party to implode. Are you kidding me? This is like watching a house burn down and saying, we'll grab the fire extinguisher, maybe in a few months. But wait, there's more. This grim forecast comes hot on the heels of President Trump's latest economic genius move, slapping new tariffs on imported goods from around the world, with an extra spicy dose aimed at China. Because nothing screams economic stability like a good old-fashioned trade war, right? And let's not forget, the Fed's next meeting is May 6-7, 2025, where they'll likely sit on their hands, sip their lattes, and wait for data while the economy teeters on the edge of a cliff. Classic. Let's zoom in on the elephant in the room, tariffs. Oh, tariffs, how we love to hate you. Trump's latest round of levies is like throwing a Molotov cocktail into an already fragile economy. And don't just take my word for it, look at the data. A report from the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBR, in 2024 showed that the 2018-2019 tariffs cost U.S. consumers and businesses $40 billion annually in higher prices. Fast forward to 2025, and we're seeing history repeat itself, but on steroids. The Peterson Institute for International Economics estimates that these new tariffs could shave off 0.2% of U.S. GDP growth in 2025 alone. That might not sound like much, but when you're already flirting with zero growth, every decimal point counts. And here's the kicker, tariffs don't just hurt GDP, they're inflationary dynamite. James Knightley, chief international economist at ING, nailed it when he said, tariffs could show up in inflation within just a couple of months, and Fed officials are concerned about the potential for second-round effects. Translation: higher prices for everything from your morning coffee to your kids' sneakers, followed by businesses passing those costs on to you, the consumer, in a vicious cycle. Just look at the Consumer Price Index, CPI, data. Inflation, which the Fed wants at a cute little 2%, was still stubbornly above that target in March 2025, even after cooling slightly from its 2024 peak. And now, with tariffs back in the mix, we're staring down the barrel of another inflationary surge. Bravo, government, bravo. Now, let's talk about the Federal Reserve, the supposed guardian of economic stability, currently caught in a tug-of-war between its two mandates, controlling inflation and maximizing employment. According to the Bloomberg survey, a whopping majority of economists think these two goals are on a collision course in the next 12 months. And guess what? They're right. Inflation is still too hot, and unemployment, while low, is showing cracks. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that hiring slowed significantly in Q1 2025, with job growth averaging just 150,000 per month compared to 250,000 in 2023. Layoffs are still low, sure, but consumer spending, the backbone of the economy, is starting to wobble under the weight of higher prices and borrowing costs. So, what's the Fed to do? Cut rates to juice the economy and risk runaway inflation? Or hold steady and watch unemployment creep up as businesses tighten their belts? The economists are split, 32% say cut rates, 25% say hold steady, and 43% think the Fed will play the wait-and-see game until the economy forces their hand. Spoiler alert, wait and see is code for, we have no idea what we're doing. Just look at the GDP numbers, a contraction in Q1 2025, the first since 2022, driven by a pre-tariff import surge that distorted the data. But dig into the details, and consumer spending is still holding up, for now. How long can that last with tariffs, inflation, and a Fed that's paralyzed by indecision? And now, for the main event, Trump versus Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Folks, this is the economic equivalent of a cage match, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Trump's been on a tear, criticizing the Fed at every turn, even floating the idea of firing Powell. On April 18, 2025, National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett told reporters the president was studying whether he could give Powell the boot. The markets freaked out, stocks dropped, Treasury yields spiked, and Trump backpedaled, saying he had no intention of firing Powell. Sure, Jan. But here's the thing, nearly two-thirds of economists surveyed by Bloomberg think that if Trump actually pulled the trigger, it would cause a severe and sustained negative reaction in financial markets or even a full-blown crisis. And they're not wrong. Just look at history. When President Nixon pressured Fed Chair Arthur Burns to keep rates low in the 1970s, it fueled stagflation that haunted the economy for a decade. Or take a more recent example, Turkey's President Erdogan meddling with the central bank in 2021, leading to a currency crisis and 80% inflation. Do we really want to roll the dice on that here? Philip Merry, senior U.S. strategist at Rabobank, put it perfectly: the Fed and Trump are on a collision course, and once it becomes clear that the Fed has taken a sustained pause in the cutting cycle, Trump is likely to take steps to either remove Powell from the chair or undermine his authority by appointing a shadow chair. A shadow chair? Are we in a Bond movie now? This isn't just bad policy, it's a recipe for chaos. Now, let's zoom out from the headlines and look at the bigger picture. This isn't just about tariffs or Trump's Fed feud, it's about a government that's been asleep at the wheel for years, papering over structural problems with short-term gimmicks. Take deregulation, another Trump favorite. Sure, it sounds great: cut red tape, unleash the free market. But the data tells a different story. A 2024 study by the Economic Policy Institute found that deregulation in key sectors like finance and energy has led to higher consumer costs and increased market concentration, not lower prices or more competition. And reduced immigration? The Congressional Budget Office estimates that cutting immigration by 50% could shrink the labor force by 2 million workers by 2030, dragging down GDP growth by 0.3% annually. These aren't solutions, they're time bombs. And let's not forget tax reform, the golden child of economic policy debates. Trump's 2017 tax cuts were supposed to supercharge growth, but what did we get? A sugar high that faded fast. The Tax Policy Center found that 60% of the benefits went to the top 20% of earners, while wage growth for the average worker barely budged. Meanwhile, the federal deficit ballooned to $1.5 trillion in 2024, according to the U.S. Treasury, leaving us with less fiscal wiggle room to fight the next recession. Great job, team. So, where does this leave us? With an economy on the brink, a Fed caught in a no-win situation, and a government that seems more interested in political theater than actual solutions. The tariffs are a self-inflicted wound, the Fed's indecision is a masterclass in cowardice, and Trump's Fed feud is a ticking time bomb. And who pays the price? You, the hard-working American, stuck with higher prices, slower growth, and a government that's too busy playing economic whack-a-mole to fix the real problems. Here at Boss Economics World, we're not just here to complain, we're here to demand better. It's time for the government to stop treating the economy like a reality TV show and start addressing the structural issues, invest in infrastructure, reform the tax code to actually help the middle class, and, here's a wild idea, stop picking fights with the federal. Until then, folks, keep your wallets tight and your eyes peeled, because this economic roller coaster is just getting started. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Boss Economics World. If you're as fed up as I am, smash that like button, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. Let's keep shining a light on this economic clown show until someone in Washington finally gets the memo. See you next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and stay boss.